The year is 850 BC. The kingdom of Israel is divided. The northern kingdom faces a formidable enemy, the Arameans. Led by King Ben-Hadad, the Arameans have laid siege to Samaria. The city is surrounded. No one can enter or leave. Food supplies dwindle. Fear grips the hearts of the people. It is a story of suffering, faith, and divine intervention. It's a story that speaks to the very core of what it means to believe. Even in the darkest of times, there is always hope. To understand how this dire situation came to be, we must go back in time. The prophet Elisha had warned the Israelite king of the impending Aramean attack. But the king, blinded by pride, ignored the prophet's words. He dismissed Elisha's warnings, trusting in his own strength and army. The king's hubris would have dire consequences for his people. The Arameans, sensing weakness, saw an opportunity to crush their enemy. They amassed their armies and marched on Samaria. The prophet Elisha had warned the king, but his words fell on deaf ears. Now, trapped within the city walls, the people of Samaria are paying the price for their king's arrogance. The Aramean army under Ben-Hadad tightened their grip on Samaria. The siege cut off the city's lifeline. Once bustling trade routes now stood deserted. Inside the city walls, the atmosphere was thick with dread. The vibrant markets were now empty. Children's laughter was replaced by the whimpers of hunger. Fear gnawed at every conversation. The king, worried, scanned the horizon for relief. All he saw was the relentless Aramean army. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. The reality of their situation dawned on the people. The siege was a living nightmare unfolding before their eyes. Samaria, once prosperous, was now a prison. The longer the siege dragged on, the scarcer food became. The wealthy, accustomed to a life of luxury, found their stores dwindling. The poor, who lived hand to mouth even in the best of times, were the first to feel the pangs of hunger. The price of food soared to unimaginable heights. A donkey's head, once considered unfit for consumption, was now sold for 80 shekels of silver. A small measure of dove's dung, a desperate substitute for grain, fetched 5 shekels. The siege was not just starving the people of Samaria, it was stripping them of their dignity, reducing them to the basest instincts of survival. Stories began to circulate, whispered in hushed tones, of unspeakable acts committed under the cover of darkness. Mothers, driven mad by the cries of their starving children, resorted to the unthinkable. The siege, a consequence of their king's arrogance, had unleashed a darkness upon the city that chilled the very soul. One day, as King Joram walked among the people, disguised in ordinary clothes to witness their plight firsthand, a woman cried out to him, "My lord, the king," she pleaded, her voice hoarse with desperation. "This woman and I agreed to cook and eat our sons. We ate my son, but now she has hidden hers." This heart-wrenching cry, a chilling testament to the depths of their despair, pierced the king's heart like a dagger. Word of the unspeakable horrors unfolding in Samaria reached Elisha, the prophet of God. He had warned the king, but his words had been ignored. Yet despite the king's disbelief, Elisha's heart was moved with compassion for the suffering people. Summoned to the palace, Elisha found himself face to face with a king, consumed by guilt and despair. "This is your fault," the king accused, his voice laced with bitterness. "Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" But Elisha, a man of unwavering faith, refused to let the king wallow in despair. "Hear the word of the Lord," Elisha proclaimed, his voice ringing with authority. "This is what the Lord says. About this time tomorrow, a seah of the finest flour will sell for a shekel and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria." Elisha's words, a beacon of hope in the darkness, offered the promise of a miracle. The king's officer, a man hardened by years of war and skepticism, scoffed at the prophet's words. "Look," he retorted, his voice dripping with disbelief. "Even if the Lord opened the floodgates of heaven, could this possibly happen?" To him, the situation seemed utterly hopeless, beyond even the reach of divine intervention. Despite the officer's cynicism, Elisha's prophecy sparked a flicker of hope in the hearts of some. Could it be true? Could God, in their darkest hour, provide a way out of this impossible situation? Yet for many, the weight of doubt proved too heavy to bear. The people of Samaria, battered by weeks of starvation and despair, found it hard to believe that their fortunes could change so dramatically. The memory of their empty stomachs, their gnawing hunger, was a stark reminder of their desperate reality. Could a single prophecy truly erase the horrors they had witnessed, the depths of despair they had plumbed? Even the king, despite his desperation, struggled to reconcile Elisha's words with the dire situation unfolding before his very eyes. The Aramean army still surrounded the city, their grip on Samaria as tight as ever. The streets were still filled with the emaciated and the dying, their cries a constant reminder of the siege's toll. In the heart of the city, within the very walls of the palace, a battle raged, not one of swords and arrows, but of faith and doubt. On one side, the impossible promise of God's provision, on the other, the crushing weight of their present reality. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the beleaguered city, the people of Samaria found themselves suspended between hope and despair, waiting, watching, praying for a miracle. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the besieged city of Samaria, a sense of weary resignation settled over its inhabitants. Among the most desperate were 4 lepers, outcasts forced to live outside the city walls. Driven by hunger and despair, the lepers huddled together outside the city gate. "Why stay we here until we die?" one of them rasped. "Let us go over unto the host of the Syrians," one of the lepers suggested. "If they save us alive, we shall live, and if they kill us, we shall but die." It was a desperate gamble, a leap of faith fueled by the certainty of their impending demise. Section 2. An unexpected discovery. As darkness enveloped the city, the 4 lepers, their bodies weakened by hunger but their spirits strengthened by a flicker of hope, cautiously made their way towards the Syrian camp. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig sent shivers down their spines. The fear of the unknown was a heavy weight, but the pangs of hunger, the certainty of death within the city walls, propelled them forward. To their astonishment, an eerie silence hung over the Syrian camp. The usual sounds of soldiers talking, horses neighing, weapons clanging were absent, replaced by an unsettling stillness. Had they stumbled upon an ambush? Or had something even more inexplicable occurred? Trembling with fear and anticipation, the lepers crept from tent to tent. To their utter disbelief, they found the camp completely deserted. Cooking fires burned unattended, food lay half-eaten on abandoned plates, weapons lay scattered on the ground. It was as if the entire Syrian army had vanished into thin air. The lepers, their initial fear giving way to bewilderment, wandered through the deserted camp, their hands shaking as they touched the abandoned provisions. It was a scene both eerie and exhilarating. The enemy who had held them captive for so long was gone, vanished without a trace. Section 3. From doubt to feast. News of the abandoned Syrian camp spread through Samaria like wildfire. At first, people met the story with disbelief, their skepticism a product of weeks of despair. Could it be true? Had God, as Elisha had promised, delivered them from their enemies? Driven by a mixture of curiosity and cautious hope, the people of Samaria cautiously made their way towards the Syrian camp. The sight that greeted them was nothing short of astonishing. Tents stood empty, their flaps swaying gently in the breeze. Horses still saddled grazed peacefully nearby. And everywhere they looked, there was food. More food than they had ever seen before. Hesitantly at first, then with growing excitement, the people of Samaria began to gather the abandoned provisions. Sacks of grain, once so precious, were now piled high. Jars of oil, a luxury they had long forgotten, were passed from hand to hand. The air, once heavy with the stench of starvation, was now filled with the sounds of laughter and celebration. Elisha's prophecy, once dismissed as the ramblings of a madman, had come to pass in the most unexpected way. God, in his infinite mercy, had not only delivered them from their enemies, but had also provided for their every need. The siege was broken, not by the might of their army, but by the invisible hand of God. As the people of Samaria feasted on the bounty of the Syrian camp, a sense of joyous relief washed over the city. Yet, amidst the celebrations, there was a sobering reminder that doubt can have its own consequences. The king's officer who scoffed at Elisha's prophecy met a tragic end. As people rushed out of the city gate, He was trampled to death in the chaos. His skepticism cost him his life, a stark reminder of the importance of faith. Unbeknownst to the starving citizens of Samaria, a strange event had transpired within the Aramean camp. As darkness blanketed the land, a sound like the roar of a vast army echoed through the night. Panic seized the Aramean soldiers, convinced they were under attack by a force far greater than their own. They abandoned their camp in disarray, leaving tents, food, and weapons behind. Ben-Hadad, the proud king, found himself swept along by the tide of his fleeing army. The Bible tells us that the Lord caused the Arameans to hear the sound of chariots and a great army. Was it a literal army of angels or a trick of the mind? The effect was undeniable. The Arameans fled, leaving everything behind. Some scholars speculate that the Israelites may have devised a clever ruse, but it was ultimately God who orchestrated the events. Whether through a mighty display of power or a subtle whisper, God's ways are mysterious but faithful. The following morning, a lone figure emerged from Samaria. It was the king's officer who had doubted Elisha's prophecy. He found the Aramean camp deserted, treasures scattered everywhere. Overwhelmed, he realized the true meaning of Elisha's prophecy. God had provided through the unexpected flight of their enemies. Word of the abandoned Aramean camp spread through Samaria. People hesitated at first, but as food carts rolled in, a collective cheer erupted. The siege was broken, and the enemy had vanished. The streets, once silent, now echoed with celebration. God had delivered his people through unexpected means. The story of the siege of Samaria is a testament to the power of faith. Faced with hardship, the people had a choice: despair or faith. Elisha's unwavering belief in God's promise stood as a beacon of hope. The lepers, driven by desperation, placed their trust in God's mercy. Even King Joram eventually humbled himself, highlighting the transformative power of faith. The siege of Samaria reminds us of the peril of pride. King Joram, blinded by his own power, had turned away from God. His arrogance led him to ignore the threat of the Arameans. The famine was a stark reminder of the consequences of forgetting our dependence on God. True strength lies in humbling ourselves before God. God often delivers in unexpected ways. Instead of a dramatic display, he used ordinary events to save Samaria. The Arameans fled, leaving provisions behind. This reminds us that God works in ways we least expect. Trust in God's plan, even when it defies our understanding. The story of the siege of Samaria speaks to the universal experience of facing trials. It offers a beacon of hope in moments of darkness and despair. God sees our pain and is working to bring about our deliverance. The siege is a story of God's enduring faithfulness. Even in the darkest nights, dawn will eventually break. The siege of Samaria is a testament to God's unwavering faithfulness. Despite the Israelites' unfaithfulness, God did not abandon them. He provided deliverance in his own time. The story is a timeless message of hope and God's unchanging character. God is our refuge and strength, guiding us through darkness. The siege of Samaria is a call to courage and hope. Even in the darkest times, God is at work. Trust in God's promises, even when they seem impossible. Live with courage, knowing God is bigger than any obstacle. Let the story inspire you to live a life of faith and hope. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a thumbs up and share this story of our Savior Jesus Christ. And if you haven't already, come on over and join our family by subscribing to our channel. May God bless you and all your endeavors. Thank you for watching.